The following is a sponsored message from the Prevent Drowning Foundation of San Diego. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit, and a majority of our budget comes from listeners and readers like you. But we also depend on revenue from grants and advertisers to maintain independence and produce more of the hard-hitting journalism you expect from us. Did you know that according to the CDC, drowning kills more children who are 1 to 4 years old than anything else except birth defects? Among children 1 to 14, drowning is the second leading cause of unintentional injury death. Prevent Drowning Foundation of San Diego believes drowning is preventable, and it is the nonprofit's vision to teach every child in San Diego how to swim. To learn more about their mission and how to make a difference in your community, please visit www.preventdrowningfoundation.org. And if you like our work and are interested in becoming a sponsor, please email development@voiceofsandiego.org.
Welcome to those listening on News Radio 600 Coco. My name is Scott Lewis. Here with my friend Andrew Keats.
What's up?
Sarah Libby.
Hello.
This is, of course, the Voice of San Diego podcast. And we've got a good show today. We've got Jesse Marks going to come in. He's going to talk about this banana story he wrote about a local investor in a marijuana industry interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how that spiraled out of control. Fascinating story of attempted kidnapping and murder. Woo! Did not know that's where that story was going when he first dug into it months and months ago. We've also,
but in retrospect, it makes sense.
Yeah.
We're also going to help amplify new coinage, some new phraseology.
I think it's new. I'm curious whether Assemblyman Todd Gloria has been banding about this term in private and keeping it from us for years, but I do like it.
But at first, it was kind of a week of quotes, especially on social media and in the written word. We've been talking about this Brews and News we had at Barrio Logan, and it seems to have some legs. There was a lot of discussion, of course, with outgoing city councilman, San Diego City Councilman David Alvarez, who, along with Georgette Gomez, tried to articulate something about the city council and city politics, and how they're on the left now, as we sort of move into this world where there's like a lot more division on the left within the Democratic Party than in some ways within the Democrats versus Republican framing. And he was talking about how there's sort of this two cultures of this transactional culture of establishment and special interests, and then this like community level candidate. And he was talking about how Monica Montgomery, who ousted City Council President Myrtle Cole, Vivian Moreno, who took over for him in that City Council district, District 8, and Georgette Gomez, they all sort of represent the community as opposed to this transactional culture, right?
Yeah.
And there was one quote in particular that Georgette Gomez, when I said, like, do you agree with that? Do you agree with that framing, where there's on the one side this transactional establishment culture, which includes unions,
mm-hmm.
versus this community one, right? And she said, well, we have to be honest that if you look at the track record of special deals, they're there. How we pick council president is how we make special deals for supporting one item or another. That has occurred, and I don't think that's something we're not aware of. The reason we still have communities that aren't getting their fair share is that's not by accident. It's by design. So there was a lot of discussion about this. Bridget Browning, when I had her on the show, if you listened to last week's show in the interview, she called that idea that Alvarez expressed about unions representing this transactional establishment and there being a community difference between that offensive. Lorena Gonzalez on Facebook, Assemblywoman, probably de facto Democratic leader in the region. Fair enough. She said, unions have long been the voice of economic interests in our communities, especially those we represent south of the 94. They may not always get the politics just right, but to disregard them as special interests or part of the downtown establishment preserving the status quo is not only offensive, but wrong, and do not take the bait of that narrative. Whew. Brews and News ever created so much news?
I think that's the first one. It's interesting. There is, an embedded admission in there that they seem to have gotten the politics wrong in a couple of these local city council races. So maybe there's some introspection there about why that happened or how that could change. But yeah, I think that both Bridget and Lorena were talking about, and I talked to Monica Montgomery yesterday, and she said something like, look, I want to be clear that when I talk about this, I'm talking about leadership at these labor unions that felt this way. I recognize that the rank and file, many of those people supported me, and those people come from the community. I'm talking about how leadership decided to spend their money.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think...
Is that a walk back?
I think it's an important distinction.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a walk back. I mean, it's like it's drawing a distinction between the members of the labor unions and the political leadership of the labor unions.
Yeah. So I have a little news that we were looking at two big decisions to come down before the next sort of month or so within the city of San Diego and its politics. One was who gets to be council president. I don't know who that is yet. Don't have news on that. Georgette Gomez is obviously going for it. Chris Ward going for it. Sounds like Barbara Bree going for it. That could be a very powerful, influential position, depending on what that person does with it. We'll see. But the news I got is that the second issue we were watching for, whether the mayor would push for a special election before the new council took its seats, that's not going to happen. The mayor has decided to push for a special election in the new year with the new city council seated. Seems like a wise move. Like you don't want to start off with, already sort of, rushing through things like that and trying to disenfranchise the new sitting council. You might wait for them to see if they can weigh in on it. I think it makes whipping the votes a little tougher for him, though. We'll see, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think it keeps one more chit on the negative side of the ledger out of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Why they've already had so many missteps in pushing this measure. Why add to it that they had to rush this vote with a lame duck council?
Yeah, you don't want those council members to just be de facto opposed to it because they didn't get to go. No matter what they actually do to affect whether there's a special election, you kind of want to have the chance to get them on board with it, right?
Right, and I mean, again, it's like for a bipartisan plan.
Yeah,
it's running into an awful lot of hurdles, right? Like, isn't the idea of getting everybody to support this thing the idea that you should, grease the skids on this a little bit? And so, yeah, like rushing it through this final vote seems like it is the type of thing to be avoided if you can at all figure out a way to get the votes you need with the new council.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a lift either way. I mean, we already saw pushback by the groups that passed measures K&L kind of preemptively saying, remember those measures we passed? They're still a thing, and we're still big fans.
Yeah.
So can we work on a shorthand for a second for this tax increase? So what we're talking about, of course, is it would raise the hotel room.
It does need a shorthand. I'm sick and tired of writing that explanatory sentence that's like 20 words on its own.
Right.
It's driving me crazy.
It would raise the hotel room tax. That's the main part, right? And it would expand.
That's the main part. Ideally, we're just going to raise the taxes.
It would expand the convention center, fund homeless services, and pay for some road repairs. Yeah. So it's the hotel, homeless, or hotel, convention, homeless, road. There's just, what can we do with that? There's got to be something there's no convadium. There's nothing I can wrap my head around.
I feel like brainstorming this out loud is going to be bad.
It's probably not a good idea. But how about?
But let's try.
Let me say that. Let me say this though. I'm not a lawyer, but does the difficulty of describing this quickly in any way give credence to the idea that this might not pass the single subject rule?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's no simple way to describe it because it's so diverse.
Yeah, what's the overarching principle around these three things? Convention center, homelessness, and roads are not inexplicably related.
They're all
government services.
They're all something in
Sure.
city public affairs. Did you hear
Yes.
Bridget Browning last week with me? She was like, I was like trying to get her to say whether she supported the special election for this or not. And she was like, just dying. She just obviously just like is willing to go along with it. Maybe agrees that, if we need to do it fast in order to make sure it qualifies for that legal loophole we've been talking about that would allow it to pass, which is 50.1%. She sees that argument, but she's also kind of like, ugh. Just kind of like, ugh.
Right.
There's a lot of people just kind of swallowing this. But she said definitively, and I thought this was interesting, that it cannot get 2/3 vote.
Right.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
seems clear.
I appreciate her saying it, but what I'd be more interested in is finding the person who thinks it can get 2/3 vote.
It would be a big lift. It'd be a big lift.
Anybody out there who thinks that this measure is capable of getting 66.6% approval, please at me.
Yeah, no, better yet, record a voice memo and send it to us, and we'll play it.
Yeah.
All right. It was indeed a week of quotes. Scott Sherman, I just wanted to highlight this one real quick. Scott Sherman, city council member, wrote a commentary raising the alarm about the deal that will be worked on by the mayor and San Diego State University in order to purchase that land after Measure G passed at Mission Valley, the stadium land. Remember, there's several promises. One promise was that San Diego State would pay fair market value for this land. They said it not only in the initiative Measure G, but also they've said it on San Diego State's own sites, websites and such. He said, Scott Sherman, in his commentary with the UT, unfortunately, rumors are already swirling around City Hall of plans to sell the property at less than market value and possibly give it away for free. Now, I think, Andy, you put this best. You said giving SDSU the land would be a kind of principle you could defend. I'm not sure I agree with it, but it would be a principled idea.
You would be able to, on day one, pull 6 research papers off the shelf from Brookings or wherever that would say that is a defensible economic development decision.
To give a bunch of land to a university to maximize, and that would benefit the region for a long time, like it did with UCSD.
Yeah, it's happened here.
Okay, so, but I think the counterpoint is that if you say you still need to get fair market value and then you monkey the numbers to pay a tiny amount for it, that's just a heist. Like, it's one thing to give the land out of principle. It's another thing to monkey it down to nothing.
Yeah, and I think there's a reasonable response to that. It's like, okay, whatever. Like, the end result's the same either way. But, yeah, there's something that's just smells fishy about it if you're saying, no, we are paying fair market value. And once you deduct the environmental remediation and the cost of destruction and the cost of preparing for development and all the traffic mitigation that's required, then the fair market value is $0.
Yeah, I think you put it best where it's like if they paid $0, that would be one thing, but if they paid like a few million, that's clearly like a giveaway, then it's even more offensive because you're just going through this charade.
Yeah, and like, Soccer City is dead to the city of San Diego. We really don't need to mention it again, but like they ran into this too, in the way that they structured their initiative with the $10,000 minimum or whatever, and they got beat up for it, but it was their attempt to like safeguard themselves from getting it for free, which would be seen as a giveaway, and ensure that they'd pay something. But like once you pay, some nominal sum that isn't zero but might as well be zero, then people's hackles are up.
Well, and I was there at the stadium site, and there just yesterday. I was just looking around. That is just a vast piece of land.
It's so big.
It's so big, and it's in the middle of the city. It's perfectly set up, right with transit. It's like remember we always talk about the Soccer City appraisal, but there's another measure out there. That was the mayor's own task force. CSAG, remember that? Remember that hog?
Yeah, I remember that waste of my life.
CSAG. Remember, they did a study of this thing, and they put that at hundreds of millions of dollars, not 88.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that based on the idea that each acre was worth some millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And like in downtown, an acre of land is worth $1 million more, and so the idea that you're going to do 130 acres for nothing, and call it something, I mean, like that's just it's going to be fascinating to watch. And I think that all the incentives are in place for the mayor to just try to ram through some sort of really nice deal for San Diego State. So we'll see if there's any pushback to that, or if some of this is just like trial balloon type stuff. Right?
I mean, the thing is that their hands are sort of tied. Like, what I would like to say is, if they give it away for nothing or close to nothing, I would hope they just lean into it and say, the whole point here is to make sure that San Diego State expands and has a successful expansion, and that will be good for the region. But the way the initiative was structured, they kind of can't.
Right. And also,
so I don't know. I don't want to get too down the line of like grading their rhetoric if the actuarial discussion is the same either way. But I would just rather them acknowledge that they're giving it away because that's what they want to do.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into this San Diego special. Assemblyman Todd Gloria, a rumored mayoral candidate, of course, wrote in an op-ed for us that, basically tried to coin a new phrase, the San Diego special. So we're talking about the airport and the expansion and redesign of Terminal 1, which he says is vital. Makes a good case about how it's embarrassing for a tourism area to walk in there. Now, you like Terminal 1, right?
Love it.
It's fine. It's quick.
Quick.
It's jammed in there, though. I was in there with my kids and my mom. Like,
if your flight gets delayed and you have to spend a few hours there,
it's not nice.
It is not a pleasant experience.
So Gloria said this. He said, we cannot let this, because of all the problems with this expansion idea and the concern that the environmental impact report generated among rival agencies to the airport. He said, we cannot let this be another San Diego special, which he defined as where an obvious solution to a long-running problem dies because of lack of vision, leadership, and action. Is that a thing? Is San Diego special a thing? Can we just start to brand this as a thing?
Can I make this about me for a second?
Please.
Obviously. I'm into that.
Yes, the answer is yes. So the hallmark of any good editor is being able to recognize a little gem buried in a story when you see one.
Yeah.
And I read this, said, hallelujah, San Diego special.
Yeah.
There's finally a word for this thing that we're always talking about.
Yeah.
So sure, Todd Gloria wrote it, but really,
It was you.
it was me.
Yeah.
Hey, good job, Sarah.
Yeah. Good job.
Way to go.
Nice. Yeah. Let's see if we can expand Sarah's coinage of this.
Exactly.
I do wonder though, like, is this a term that elected officials bandy about?
I know. I'm dying to know.
I'm dying to know that.
I don't know, but I think we've talked about it. Maybe it came in part from our podcast
Exactly.
with Todd.
So it's
Todd
probably originated with us.
Yeah.
Was expressed through Assemblyman Gloria.
Yeah.
But then only
He
became
is
public because of the keen eye of Sarah Libby.
Right.
This is
Exactly.
an intermediary in
Exactly.
this whole
Sure.
thing. Yeah.
Right. So that I think I would expand the definition a little bit, which is a San
We
Diego
need to
special.
take ownership of this a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That a San Diego special is not just like a obvious solution not getting implemented, but just kind of a ongoing blah fest of discussion. So I'd like to be able to put like the expansion of the convention center in there.
Oh, that's absolutely one.
And the stadium, like that land is still there 15 years after everyone wanted to change it. Like,
I think vacation rentals would qualify.
right. So I would branch it out a little bit more, not to be, I don't want the requirement to be that there's an obvious solution we just can't pull the trigger for, but that there's just this
It's like
constant
we can't
thing.
do anything.
We're stuck. It's a paralysis. Come on.
I think I kind of disagree with you guys.
Damn it.
I think the obvious solution component adds an important, like, how can you not solve this? Like, Airbnb is there is a legitimate difference of opinion.
There absolutely
that makes it
is.
intransigent.
But like the fact that they couldn't even pass the plan that they'd all agreed on, and it took like 12 tries, and then they immediately rescinded that.
Yeah, there is an obvious
seems like a
solution
thing.
to vacation rentals.
Come on.
It's some sort of compromise that nobody's willing to do as far as like letting 1 or 2 units be vacation rental.
Well, if that's the obvious solution, then literally every public policy solution in the world has an obvious solution, which is a compromise of some kind that people, because they're jerks, can't agree
But
to.
isn't that literally what he's talking about?
No, he's saying that there is a very specific obvious solution to this problem.
No, he didn't. He didn't really articulate it. He just said,
Come together and
do the
something.
intermodal
Yeah.
transit center or whatever.
Yeah,
Did he outline a more specific solution than we should figure this out?
I'm reminded of this op-ed that Scott Peters wrote back at the height of the stadium discussion, and he was advocating, I think, for a downtown stadium. And I don't even remember what his arguments on the merits were, but there was just this like really intense tone in his op-ed where it was like, can't we just do something? And so whatever the merits were that he was arguing, like kind of in the background of his argument were just like, we should do a thing. Whether it's the best plan or not matters a little less than just like, can't we pull anything off?
Right.
I think where I'm coming from that makes me a little bit wary of this is that I think we're dangerously close to the like parodyable Ron Fournier response of like, why won't Obama lead? Which is like an easy pundit response to a genuine disagreement playing out.
No,
that's like, well, why can't you, by sheer force of will, make people who disagree agree?
No. So I agree with that, except that I think that in each of these cases, that what they're identifying is that nobody's stepping up to give up anything. That you know, the airport's not giving up a little bit, or the MTS isn't giving up a little bit, or San Diego isn't giving up a little bit to agree that this is the plan for attaching the trolley to the airport, and therefore we're going to build everything off of that. That there's obviously a goal that everyone wants to get to, but that they can't get there because whatever function of leadership and compromise isn't being pulled. It's not, and so we can say like there are just intractable debates that we can never get beyond, but these are all agreed upon obvious problems that everybody wants to solve. So that's why I want to redefine that. We do have to take a break, but I want to keep going on this because I think it's interesting. And we'll, of course, have Jesse Mark come in and talk about his banana story. This has been The Voice of San Diego. The first part, of course, which is done in partnership with our friends and partners at News Radio 600 Kogo. Stay tuned if you're on the podcast. If you're not on the podcast, figure out the podcast and then come back and listen to the rest of the show. Thank you.
The following is a sponsored message from Monarch School. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit, and a majority of our budget comes from listeners and readers like you. But we also depend on revenue from grants and advertisers to maintain independence and produce more of the hard-hitting journalism you expect from us. Did you know that a student who does not receive a high school degree is 4.5 times more likely to experience homelessness as an adult? At Monarch School, they are working to change those odds. Monarch educates youth experiencing homelessness in San Diego and empowers them to succeed in both school and life. To learn more about Monarch School and find ways to get involved, please visit monarchschools.org.
Okay, we are back. We are going to continue. We're going to get to a resolution of the exact definition of a San Diego special. I'm determined to here. So we left it at, you still think there has to be like some sort of clear. So I guess give me an example of where there's an obvious solution that we can't somehow get to qualify for a San Diego special. Otherwise, I think we do defer to it being a debate that we have to solve. Everybody agrees we have to solve, but that we can't. We just can't. And it shouldn't be that hard. Or do you relent?
Well, I don't know of anything that has an obvious solution.
Right? Like so good. Good job
Yeah.
for relenting.
Well, I'm willing to admit I can't think of something that has like an uncontroversial solution. Like the convention center expansion, everybody says no one disagrees that we want to expand the convention center, which isn't really true. There's a lot of people who think that it's like against the Coastal Commission or the California Coastal Act, that it shuts off access, or that it's not a good priority in the first place.
Okay, then let's modify.
You know what I mean?
Then let's modify. It's an obvious debate it's an obvious problem with a debate where there is an obvious enough amount of political support for a solution.
Well, in that case, the convention center expansion by raising the hotel tax certainly qualifies.
Right.
There's like the vast majority of politically involved people in San Diego are on the side of we should raise hotel taxes to expand the convention center.
Okay, and so the vacation rentals you would say would not qualify because the cleave is too balanced.
Definitely.
So we should accept that that's an ongoing debate that they can't solve, even if there's like an obvious compromise that should be able to like work its way through.
Right, that other cities have been able to push through.
Yeah. Right.
And I would add the Mission Valley Stadium site to the convention center side, that like, sure, there are a lot of people out there who have gone out of their way to say we can have a much more robust discussion of potential solutions there. But I think given the number of actual solutions that have been put forward over the last 15 years, we can say that those other people are in the minority, and that there does seem to be a broad consensus around the fact that that land should be developed into housing, mixed-use, walkable things, whether it's a college campus or a urban lifestyle area, and that the anchor of it should include a football stadium, a sports stadium and a river park.
Right.
And there's been a half dozen to a dozen solutions over the last 15 years that have all basically been that
basic contour.
Basic.
Chargers proposed in 2004.
Yeah. So I think that would be another one that I would say and I think SDSU West and Soccer City both fall into that category.
All right. So then let's identify it with the airport thing.
Yeah.
Because let's give Todd his thing. He was at least the vehicle for articulating this. So if we look at the airport,
the vehicle for articulating this, Assemblyman, you are, most of the time you guys out there are wrong when you criticize us, most of the time. But Assemblyman, you are well within your rights to feel like we have taken something from you in this show.
But it's obvious what we're doing. You know, we're very openly doing credit. It. Yes. So okay, so for the airport, I guess what's really interesting about this is that the airport would contend that the basic idea on the books right now for transit at the airport is to have an intermodal transit center.
Yeah.
The old bowel disease. And
I love the idea of the obvious solution being this like incomprehensible jargon.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
a San Diego special.
The intermodal transit center, which would connect high-speed rail, the trolley, and the airport right there around
Coaster and Amtrak as well.
Coaster and Amtrak right there around the Washington Street, Middletown area, right?
Wherever the location is, the northeast edge of the airport grounds.
Right, which is literally like an armpit of San Diego right now. If Point Loma's the arm, like it really is an arm. It's ugly. Mm-hmm. It's not developed well. So yeah, that's a spot.
Yeah.
So that is, again, incomprehensible in the sense nobody has any idea how it would be paid for or anything. So the airport has a good point when it says like, so that's on the books. That's your plan on the books. So we went ahead and drew up our response for what we would do about the transit needs at the airport based on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so if you want us to change that, you need to come up with a different plan with us about where people would get to the airport from. And what Todd Gloria is saying, I think in his op-ed, I read it this a few minutes ago, is that, that intermodal transit center is what we're talking about. Let's get it done.
Yeah, I think I understand and think the airport is on solid ground in its frustration that it's planning to the official plan. It's ever so slightly disingenuous since it is part of the unfunded portion of the official plan.
Right.
It's I can understand people's frustration that the mitigation measure that they're going to point to is the one that no one has a clear idea of how to pay for.
Right.
It's a little bit convenient.
It is convenient. On the other hand, I think they do have a point that nobody's come up with anything else yet,
Sure.
right?
So I talked to Kim Becker, the CEO of the airport authority yesterday, and her way of dealing with this after going to this mayor's summit was, well, the thing that we're all angling toward is a people mover on airport grounds that reaches up to that northeast area of the airport grounds to pick people up from rail transport. And whether that's at the Washington Street trolley station, a new trolley station, the ITC as it's currently composed, is fungible to a certain degree, but like the project that is on the table is a people mover that goes that way.
And we will set aside money
based
on what ends up coming together with that.
Yeah.
Now, describe this summit because we haven't talked about that. So introduce
yes.
that real quick. So the mayor, he showed some leadership.
Yeah, the mayor recognizing the intractability of all these different agencies and their opinions about how to deal with adding 11 new gates to the San Diego airport and all the traffic that comes with it, said, let's stop with, trading harshly worded EIR response letters, and instead let's all get to the table and figure out if we can have some sort of common ground here. That happened yesterday as we're recording this, the Tuesday. And they seem to have made, as much reasonable progress as they could have made in a meeting like this, which is they said, okay, we will redo our environmental impact report to include these other transportation projects that include spending that is not on airport grounds, which they didn't do before. And that probably means they're going to have to take a step back in their environmental review process. But that it will allow them, by taking that step back, to address a lot of the concerns that had been raised by these other agencies. In other words, like most of the things that everybody complained about and said that needed to be changed are on their way to being changed.
Now, let's also remind people or talk about what is driving the airport's sort of urgency on this, which is that the airport funds all of this infrastructure that they build, the terminals and such, with the fees that they get from airlines, right?
Yes.
Like Delta and Southwest. So Southwest and other airlines are ready to raise fees that they're finally making a profit.
Yeah, Southwest is like the anchor tenant of that Terminal 1.
Right. And so they're finally making some money as airlines, and they're like, we're ready to make this better and do this. We will raise fees. But what the airport's worried about is that, the economy is not guaranteed to keep going well.
Right.
Right.
And so we need to get this deal done as soon as possible. And so that we were trying to understand what the urgency was before.
Yeah, because most of the complaints were it's just like,
slow down.
Yeah, slow down, right?
Right.
And like, why do you have to press ahead? And I think that did provide some clarity around why they were moving so quickly.
Right. All right. So we are going to bring in Jesse Marks to talk about his story. All right. A while ago, Jesse Marks revealed a loophole in cannabis regulations passed after, of course, the 2016 Prop 64, which allowed, of course, adult use of marijuana. So he revealed a loophole that allowed for secret investors in some of these operations. And now the guy at the center of the story that he wrote is accused of attempted murder. Federal authorities accused Salam Razuki, a prominent San Diego property owner and marijuana investor, of plotting with two of his associates to kidnap and murder a business partner in Mexico. Razuki was arrested Friday, and by Monday, the allegations of criminal conspiracy had left members of San Diego's marijuana industry just stunned. They have tried hard, of course. Part of the whole promise of Prop 64 was that we were bringing a lot of this into the light and legitimacy. Jesse Marks joins us here. Jesse, what is going on?
That's a great question, Scott. So how far back do you want to go?
Well, let's talk about the loophole you found. What made you first interested in that story? What did you find?
Well, so what I found is that the Balboa Avenue Cooperative had been in a dispute over its ownership for quite some time, actually. So the two guys who came in and purchased it in 2016, their names are Salam Rizouki, who you just mentioned, and Nina
Can I just
Salam.
stop for a sec?
Mhm.
Like the idea of owners of a cooperative is pretty funny.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, and these guys essentially tried to buy their way into
every
it.
once in a while, Scott's old time as a college Marxist comes out,
Yeah.
and he gets really angry about things that only a college Marxist would care.
Well, it's a cooperative.
I
It
know,
shouldn't
but
be like the People's Market in OB. Like, I own it. What do you don't own it? It's a cooperative.
all right.
Sorry.
It's also just a name.
I know,
they're
but it's
corporations.
like, but the whole old guard of marijuana being non-profit but not was just hilarious, and I'm glad that's over.
So these guys have been fighting for control of
Sure.
it, whatever you want to call it, for quite some time.
Yeah.
And their relationship falls apart. So the one guy, Salam Rizouki, files a lawsuit against Ninas Milan this summer, basically saying he's trying to take this away from me and it's rightfully mine. But the problem is that his name is nowhere on the applications to the state and the city regulator. So he was forced to reveal himself as a silent investor in that operation and say, this is actually mine, even though nobody sees my name on it.
So what you're saying is that because he wanted to retain control of this entity or try to grab it, that he had to fess up that he had hid his involvement before that.
That's true. And he also had to explain why he did that. And so in legal filings, he said, well, when I was accused of operating an illegal dispensary in 2014 and I settled with the city, I felt that would have left a bad impression. So I didn't want
Sure.
I didn't want officials to scrutinize me too closely. I was concerned that relationship would prevent me from getting into the legal side of the industry, which is probably not true. And I think the irony in this entire situation is that Rizouki caused a lot more trouble for himself just because he wasn't upfront from the beginning.
Okay.
And didn't you speak with people who said that, this loophole probably is bigger than just this one case because other investors likely don't want their name associated with a marijuana business? They might have other business dealings that are in other industries, and they just think it would make them look bad.
Yeah, that's true. I talked to a San Francisco attorney who's also the president of the National Cannabis Bar Association, and she said that these ownership disputes are extremely prevalent. And that's because people, for one reason or another, don't want their name out there. So they could be CEOs of a publicly traded company. They don't want to be attached to the marijuana industry, or they could have a criminal past. So the way that they often disguise their ownership in these businesses is through the property. It's the real estate. So they own the property, or they own a company that manages the property. So they're entitled to some of the profits of the dispensary, but they don't have to go through the regulatory process and the backgrounding process.
So there's two different sets of people who may not want their names associated with the marijuana trade. You've got your white collar pros who don't want to be involved because they don't want to have their hands dirty because they have a commercial real estate business or whatever. And then you've got
actual criminals,
potential the what exists today of the underground market that recognizes that because they have a criminal history or whatever else and so it's both ends of it.
Yeah, and it shouldn't surprise anyone to know that when you've been revealing yourself as an owner in a company, the other guy might push you out because it's really difficult to prove that you are actually the real owner. So that's what you're seeing, and the state has actually stepped in to broaden the definitions of who is an owner in one of these businesses to close some of those loopholes, and it's
Do we know for sure if Rizouki did have a stake in this business, or does Minas claim no, he just never did?
So they actually put their financial relationship into writing late last year as their relationship was falling apart, and Ninas has since claimed that they rescinded that agreement, but that would have been a verbal agreement that they had struck to rescind it. But according to that document, it lays out quite clearly Rizouki's claims to profits over the business. I think it was 75%.
Okay, so that was interesting as a story 2 months ago or something, but
either 6 months or 2 months.
I don't know.
It was in the Trump era, so it's somewhere between a day and 12 years ago.
It was 6 weeks ago.
Okay. time. That's what I was trying to say. Is weeks.
Was that really 6 weeks ago?
Yeah, it's October 1st.
I would have believed that you wrote that story in January. I genuinely would have believed that.
So the point. So that was an interesting story about the ownership structure of these new marijuana entities and the struggles in bringing them totally into light, right? But then the story got bananas this week when we learned about Rizuki being arrested. And now here's what I don't understand. The whole case hinges on this informant who basically got them, this Rizuki and two of his associates, to organize a hit on this former business partner. And so is that an informant, as in like an informant who's a person in the community who's involved with maybe criminal activity who agrees to flip? Or is this an actual FBI like?
I thought it was an undercover agent.
It's a confidential informant, and it's strongly suggested in the criminal complaint that this person already knew them because they were communicating with him possibly for some sort of financing. So it doesn't sound like the FBI dropped in somebody necessarily to like make contact with them and then talk to them. They had already previously been talking about other things, and then
And then he was like, "Hey, by the way, they're talking about murder now."
basically, yeah,
fascinating. Yeah. So there is a incredible scene in your story which reads, go to it, voiceofsandiego.org, reads like a little novella. It's great. And there's a part of it where the informant and these two people who are going to carry this out in Mexico by taking this guy to Mexico, they go to a marijuana dispensary and they come back out with $1,000 as sort of like a deposit on the hit, right?
Yeah, so they're actually across the street and they're talking in what I gather is an office building. It's not really explained, but all three of them are together and they're talking about these plans according to prosecutors. And then one of them, whose name is Sylvia Gonzalez, who's an associate of Rizuki's, apparently goes across the street and goes into the Golden Bloom dispensary. This is in the Stockton neighborhood, and comes back with $1,000 cash. And that is supposed to be the deposit on the hit, according to prosecutors.
Which raises a lot of concerns about a specific cannabis operation being involved in crime, right?
Yeah, obviously these are all cash businesses, but they're supposed to keep track of what they're doing with regulators. And I should also point out that Rizuki actually has a financial claim in that dispensary as well. And that was part of what he revealed. Even though the dispute is over the Balboa Avenue Cooperative, he also owns companies that manage the property at Golden Bloom. So he's attached to that financially.
Well, that would, if the implication of that transaction is that Rizuki was making that money available to them to pull this off, then that would imply that he does have some sort of pull there to pull that out,
yes,
right?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Also, doesn't $1,000 seem low?
Yeah.
It wouldn't even cover my rent, so yeah.
Well, it's a deposit, right? So
Even so.
Yeah, no, I
would have thought the going
involved.
rate for kidnap and murder was higher.
So, so how did this all come down? Like, how did it all get out?
So according to prosecutors, after they gave the money to the confidential informant, they also gave him or her, we don't know who that person is, a list of addresses where Milan hangs out, and they also pointed him out to the would-be hitman outside the courthouse. And it was at that point, it sounds like, that the FBI swooped in. They interviewed Rizuki. He disappeared for a couple of days, according to his lawyers, and then they arrested Rizuki, Gonzalez, and the other person whose name is Elizabeth Juarez.
Wasn't there one moment, though, where the informant went to Rizuki and said, "Do you want to see proof of this guy's death?" Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Nah, I'm good." It's like a way to like confirm the deal was what he wanted.
Yeah, and that exchange is interesting because it suggests that the confidential informant is pushing Rizuki to say more on the record. And what you notice in the complaint is that most of the talking about these plans is being done by Gonzalez and Juarez. So a defense attorney who was interviewed by NBC yesterday kind of suggested that the case against Rizuki is going to be the hardest one to actually prove for federal prosecutors because the other two did most of the talking. So
unless they can demonstrate that financial relationship with Golden Bloom.
Well, as we learned about federal prosecutions, though, they can prove conspiracy just by what other people say, not just what the guy they're going specifically after literally admits.
Yeah, and that's important because that's the charge. It's not like an attempted murder charge because they didn't, actually like shoot a gun and miss or anything. It was just like a plan.
Right. So there's that. It's a great story, but above that though, it's a lot of intrigue for the marijuana and cannabis industry. Like they're all watching this saying like, this is not the kind of news
doesn't
we
look
want.
good.
Yeah, no, everybody I called said, "Are you crazy? I'm not going to give you a quote. I don't want to talk about this." But I did speak with the president of the Cannabis Delivery Alliance, and he basically said, look, we've been lobbying city governments around San Diego, and especially in San Diego at City Hall, for an expansion of these marketplaces. We want more permits. We want the legal industry to be bigger. And this undermines our case, because if our case is that if you have more people in this industry rather than underground, things will be safer and held accountable. Well, this is like a counterpoint to that argument. So
It also seems to put greater pressure on primarily state regulators, but in cooperation with the feds, to allow these businesses to start having access to banking. Like it seems like a substantial issue here is the all cash nature of this business is going to continue to perpetuate underground activity until that's addressed.
Yeah, they've tried to address that at the state level and failed, and so it's something that they're taking stabs at. I would imagine in the next session of the legislature they'll keep doing it, but it hasn't worked so far.
So what Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez actually told us a couple weeks ago is that Jerry Brown didn't think that was a priority at the moment, but Gavin Newsom's probably more sympathetic to it.
I mean, it seems like it should be a priority to me.
I totally agree.
It seems like it, it's worth taking a step back. Like, if the premise of legalization is going to hold, you need to start breaking down some of these soft incentives towards illegality.
Yeah, and that's the argument that the industry would make, which is you've set us up to fail. You know, you've created a more dangerous situation than needed to exist. But at the same time, we've taken a look at the legal dispensaries in San Diego and what the level of crime has been like, and it's actually pretty small. I mean, violence in these dispensaries is very limited, and occasionally it's like somebody punched a security guard in the face. So a conspiracy of kidnap and murder is now going to completely change that dynamic in the arguments going forward.
Fascinating. Well, Jesse Marks, check out his story at voiceofsandiego.org. Jesse, you want to stick around for our hero and quote?
Yeah, of course.
All right. Our hero of the week. So, what we're going to do instead, given this week, we're giving gratitude, thanks for things. We're going to express things that we are thankful for around here or whatever. And so I'm going to start with you, Sarah.
Okay, great.
What are you thinking about these days?
Well, I could say my family and my coworkers and all those wonderful
Your
things,
health.
but yeah, on behalf of me and Adriana, our producer, I'm gonna go with the next most obvious answer, which is Ariana Grande.
Yeah.
Been having a really banner few months. Latest single and music video that dropped today. Amazing.
Now,
Thank you.
who is
Next.
she?
Okay, this is also a great opportunity to point out that earlier this week, Scott asked whether Beyonce was in TLC. So I just want you to all know that.
Actually, let's unwind that a little bit. There was more to it.
I suggested if we discuss Gary Creep on this episode that we also play the song Creep naturally.
And Scott's reaction was, I might have heard that.
Yeah, he
and so then
listened to see if he was familiar with this iconic banger.
And he said his response was,
is that the group Beyonce was in?
It was like it happened in like a whirlwind 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just really hurt to be around.
It was painful.
You were a young man at this time.
I immediately corrected to, oh yeah, it was Destiny Child, right?
Oh dear God!
No,
you stop being this way.
Stop saying words. All right, so I'm thankful for Ari. I'm also thankful for Scott because this is hilarious.
Okay.
Right,
I'm going to go.
That leads well into mine.
No, let me go.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just going to, it's a very sincere, earnest one.
Good.
Why do you...
I just can't tell where it's going to go. I'm so nervous.
I am earnestly thankful for the dog infrastructure of San Diego.
Oh,
That's good.
yeah.
There's a
Good
lot
one.
of good dog
That is good.
infrastructure, dog parks, dog beach. And in particular, I want to highlight Fiesta Island.
It's so good.
I feel like there's a lot of talk still about redoing Mission Bay Park and stuff, and the Fiesta Island could eventually change. There is no place in San Diego where you can just do anything like you can at Fiesta Island.
Yeah.
You know, rockets.
There's a lot of people taking advantage of that freedom too. Let me
Yeah.
tell you. You see some stuff over at Fiesta Island.
Yeah. There's the over the line. I mean, it's just a place.
For instance, over the line.
And I think there's a lot of people who look at a place like that and they're like, we need to fix that up. This is a real town. We need to fix it up. We need sidewalks. We need fences. No, we don't need ponds. We don't need water features. Leave it alone.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful place.
It's good.
That was
You're
good.
right.
That was
You're
good.
right. That was good.
Thanks.
Ugh.
All right.
It's almost as good as Destiny's Child.
Thank you. So mine is simple. I just saw a clip earlier today of Michael Jordan when he was at UNC,
Uh-huh.
and he blocked a shot. He jumped so high to do it that he banged his head on the backboard.
Yeah, it looked like it hurt.
Was injured.
Yeah.
And I'm just so glad that out of all the times that a human could have been born and lived on Earth, that mine overlapped with Michael Jordan's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think about it a lot, that like the statistical probability of that happening is so low. And yet it did happen, and I got to see him play for my whole life.
Yeah.
And I think about like Knicks fans, and like they're born in the New York area. They had to spend their childhood rooting against Michael Jordan. And I just can't imagine a worse fate. And it didn't happen to me. I got to
Aren't you a fan of a team?
Yeah, but like it was like everyone but the Knicks got to just love Jordan.
Oh.
You know,
I don't know.
You got to
I
just
was a
enjoy
Blazers fan in that era.
You had 1 year.
1 year.
I was,
You know?
Yeah.
so I was
It was a
Jazz
banner year.
fan.
Yeah,
And-
and again, like 1 year, but like
two.
they only made the finals once.
Well, yeah.
So I don't know. It's just it's special. There's few sports things that we can all rally around, like the greatest basketball player to ever live, and that it coincided with our time on Earth.
Well, that's our Thanksgiving weekend show. Jesse, do you have any Thanksgiving plans or gratitude you want to talk about?
I want to thank you, Scott, for your truck because you're going to help me move in a few days. So thank you very much.
That's a good
That's
one.
happening, huh?
Yep.
Yeah. I've always had a truck my whole life, and these sorts of things have been part of my whole life. But it's good. I have a blanket policy of helping everybody move that asks and helping everybody paint who asks.
Oh,
Because,
paint.
no.
Ooh, that is some paying it forward stuff, man.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well,
Painting
I'm
is
retracting that, actually.
Yeah,
That
get
was-
out
Oh,
of
it's on
I
the air,
stopped
though.
that. I stopped doing that.
Ooh.
But the point of helping everybody move, I always figured I would need it back. Now, I'm never moving again in my whole life, ever.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesse just have to do something. Maybe you can come and walk Coco or something.
There
With
you
pleasure.
go.
Yeah.
All right, this has been the Voice of San Diego, and happy Thanksgiving weekend to everyone. And sure do. I'm thankful for all of you, and particularly your donations to Voice of San
Sure.
Diego. So please keep them coming, and have a good weekend.